Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on, I don't know what to call this, regular conflict. Somebody just asked me, hey, what's the difference? And I asked them, what do you mean? They were like, well, you have high conflict child custody on your channel. What's the normal amount of conflict look like? I kind of talk about this in the video, Three Phases of Conflict, but I don't really go into where I think it comes from and why it's so common. Just the ordinary amount of conflict people go through that wears off over time, and they figure out that they need to, coordinate at least on some certain limited extent so that their kids have a good future. Um, in other words, a very temporary amount of conflict. They want to know what that's about, what it comes from, to understand it. So yeah, sure, I'll explain that. I think number one, I really only think there's two things that causes it. Number one, the most common thing is insecurity, in my opinion. You have, especially with younger couples, that's really all that they have to sort of feel like they have purpose. When you're really young, you're probably not working the greatest job ever. You might not even be through school if you're going to school. And you being a parent is the absolute number one sort of sense of purpose that you have, in your life at that time. And so when you split up, and it might be an actual intrinsic sense of purpose, it might also just be, what will my parents think of me or my friends? A lot of times that sounds like such a silly thing to care about, but a lot of times that is the number one thing, especially for moms, is you don't really have anything going on. You're a parent, that's all you got. And then suddenly there's a divorce or child custody dispute and you don't get custody of your kid. And it's a humiliating, a shaming or shameful sort of thing to go through. And so I think it's the number one reason that there's conflict in the beginning, and it's fear based. They're scared of what that future looks like. They're scared of losing their one and only sense of purpose. And out of that sense of fear, they start to stretch the truth and they start to focus on things that are not actually in the best interest of the child. And that's that's a thing. It's totally nonsensical. It's not good for the kids, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's not good for the kids. The need for that parent to maintain their sense of purpose where it's at overrules or overrides what's going to create the best situation for that child going into adulthood. It just does. Shouldn't happen, does happen all the time. The second thing is what people were probably expecting me to say is the number one thing, is the sort of revenge. For me, it's more like there are these sort of points of contention, resentment, feelings of unfairness in the relationship that people want to resolve in the legal system. It's like, I need this judge to say once and for all that my ex is crazy and that I'm right and that they're wrong, and that, you know, that's the second thing that drives the conflict. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to agree. I want this because I think that it's only fair for this objective person wearing robes on the bench to actually look into the entirety of our relationship and point the finger at me and say, you were right. They're unreasonable. And that's just a completely unrealistic expectation when it comes to the court system, but it's a thing. A lot of times people say you need to love your kids more than you hate your ex. That's just like what I feel like applies to the number two sort of basis for this conflict. And I think a lot of people after a while figure it out. Whether they have to go all the way to trial or not is a question. But they figure it out. A lot of times living apart sort of makes these old feelings go stale. A couple of years later, 3 years later, people just stop caring about it. They've moved on. They found a new relationship partner. They found a new sense of purpose in life. And so they just don't care. There's just no need to get revenge. They maybe realize the court system is not going to do it. They maybe realize it's a really expensive use of their money to get that kind of determination. And so they just move on. So yeah, that's what I have, guys. I really do think that this is what drives conflict in the beginning of most of these cases. Number one, insecurity or fear of not getting the recognition from the court system that you feel you deserve. And number two is, I need to settle this score. They wronged me in so many ways, and I need this judge to hear, my story and give me the seal of approval that I did everything that I could and that I'm a good person. Basically, judge, say that I'm a good person and they're a bad person. And the way that that is supposed to manifest is I get custody of the kids and they get nothing. Totally messed up, totally doesn't make sense, completely illogical, not good for the kids, doesn't matter. That's what most, I think, young couples, sometimes not even young couples, that's what I think drives the conflict in the beginning of these cases. I don't think it turns into a high conflict child custody case unless one of those people can't let it go. And that's usually because it is attached to their identity and they feel like they will never be able to move on from the custody dispute ending. If you want to learn more about this, watch my video on the topic 3 phases of conflict. You can also watch high conflict incompetence. That being said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.